Hey Tom, welcome to my house.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, you bet. Hey, I'm glad you're able to join us for our first interview series. Just to remind the audience, we're doing these interviews so that we can educate you on anything property management, real estate investment, anything like that. If you want to see something specific, feel free to comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. So we're doing this series called Coffee, Cocktail, and Conversations. So it's about 1 o'clock now, and that's the perfect time because 1 o'clock means it's not too late for a coffee. People can have coffee at 1 o'clock, and it's not too early for a cocktail. So, and it's all the time, it's a good time for conversation. So we're gonna do that, okay? We're gonna give you a chance. You can choose a cocktail or coffee, then we're gonna have some conversation. So what's it gonna be, Tom?
Well, at 1 o'clock, and given that this is gonna be videotaped and go live eventually, I think for posterity, I should probably have this coffee at this early time of the day.
By the choice. Okay, darn, I gotta drink what you drink, so that means I gotta have a coffee too. So. All right, Tom.
Now, with that said, maybe it should have been the bourbon after all.
I know. This cheers the best. I'll have you back again, then we'll do a bourbon.
Let's do that.
So again, I'm really excited you're here, so we can interview you. You're our first one, and I want to get started with the story about how you became a property manager, because just like me, and I'm sure like a lot of people, no one really grows up saying I want to be a property manager when I grow up. So I would love to just have people know how you got started in the business.
So it really started probably 20 some years ago, and even further, I can recall conversations my dad would always have about, had I kept that house or had I bought that investment property, things would have been different for me. And so in the back of my mind, that was always there. And then so when I bought my first property to live in, what I did after that, when I grew out of that, which was a 1-bedroom condo, and I was ready to buy my next property, I think I was like 32, 33. I didn't do what a lot of people do, and that is sell the house, take the equity, and pump it into the other house. I basically kept it and turned it into rental property. So from there, I became a property manager of my own property. And I did the same thing with every property I ever acquired. I don't recall ever selling a property to buy another property. I always just saved up, made sure I had money to invest in a new property. And then about 7 years ago, having been a property manager for my own portfolio, and I just thought to myself, well, this could be a full-time job. I like this, and I knew where I was in my career. I wanted to make a change, and I knew I wanted to really begin another career, one in which I could control. So if I wanted to work till I was 70, 75, 80, with my business, I could do that, not feel like, well, the company's gonna push me out soon. I need to come up with a plan B. And so it just seemed only natural, since I was already managing properties, to get into property management. So started.
You knew that you liked the activity, you're already interested, you're doing it for yourself. So.
Yep. So I started that business and haven't looked back. So I'm managing my own properties, and I'm managing properties for my clients. And so
we all start off as our first client.
Yeah, absolutely. That seems to be the pattern I see with everybody, that I meet that's in this business.
That's cool that you kept all your homes, because like the most expensive part of the transaction is like selling it, right?
Yep.
So it's like you save so much money just by keeping it and then just moving on to your next one.
Absolutely. My only regret is not buying some of those places in like North Arlington or some of these other places where, the appreciation has been like
sold one of them.
4 or 5 times instead of like 2 times,
Yeah.
All that being said, we're all blessed to be living where we live, because we're still, the kind of appreciation you see around here is it's pretty incredible.
Yeah. So let's kind of shift to that. Like, tell me a little bit about describe your portfolio. How many properties do you manage? Where do you get your properties? Are agents a good source of business, or do you go to other sources? Where are they located? Could you kind of describe to the audience, where?
Yep. So I told you I would consider myself sort of a niche business right now, because I'm just shy of 50 properties. My properties, geographically speaking, are, as a general rule, Northern Virginia, as far out as Leesburg, out to Lake Ridge, Woodbridge, McLean, Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax, Chantilly. You know, so it's basically. I think it's very similar to where you are. And I do have a couple properties in Maryland that I manage, but I haven't been proactive about going after that space.
Yeah.
And although I'm licensed in DC, I haven't done anything to engage that population as well. Something that I'm thinking about. It's in my again. It's on my my parking lot right now of things to consider.
Yeah.
You know.
So you're about to bust through 50.
Yeah.
What's been your greatest challenges kind of going from, as you go from 0 to 50, is there a point in that transition where it's like, wow, this is something that's really a number that's really difficult to bust through?
I would say the way I'd answer that is, I think like any small business, when you start out, unless you're partnering with someone, you're doing it on your own. You know, you're basically coordinating everything.
So right now, it's just a lot of it you're doing.
Right. So you're wearing the sales hat and the operations hat, and you know you're working with the tenants and you're working with coordinating things with the owners, the property owners. So that's been great. So on the one hand, it's awesome because you're in front of everybody, you're controlling everything. But there's no doubt that as your company grows, you have to let go of these things. You have to build, in order to build the business, you have to hire people so that you can maintain the same high level of service. And so right now I think we're in a great place, but there's no doubt in my mind, I think around 60 to 70 properties is when we start bringing some people in to take on more of the operation side of the business so that I continue to work on business development activities. So to take it in that direction.
You're looking at that as your first hire, probably in the next 10, 15 properties.
Absolutely.
Taking over some of this day-to-day stuff. You can focus on business development.
Yep.
Tell me a little bit about business development. What are you doing now that works for you?
I like realtor relationships myself. I do a little marketing like you do. I think we're on some of the same, some of the tools like you have. Yeah. What is it? Thumbtack and some of these other sites. Yeah. Well, if you see a lead from one of these companies and it's like 1 or 2 in the inbox or 3, and based on what you're reading about what they're looking for, you might make a case to respond. But I see sometimes where there's like 8, 9 people that the homeowners reached out to. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm not gonna respond to that. Yeah. I mean, so do the probability on that? It's just not worth it. So I don't really deal with that. I like the idea of just creating or building relationships with real estate agents.
What do you do for that? Give me an example.
Make phone calls. Just
call people.
Meet
if they
them.
want to meet up with you. See
Show
if they have a property
up
manager.
at their office.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah, just show up.
That's more proactive than I am right now, but that is good. That works. Just building the relationships, whether it's showing up, talking to their office, or meeting with them one-on-one, right?
Where we are right now, technologically speaking, it's pretty amazing. A lot of things you can do on your computer and through social media and things like that. But I think, notwithstanding that, I think that nothing will ever outdo a personal relationship. I don't think it's different whether you're trying to sell something to somebody in a business setting or whether it's a relationship you have with someone personally, right? Like sending note cards, right? Would you rather get an email during the holidays saying happy holidays? Would you rather get a handwritten note from somebody? Right. I mean, those things will always mean something, and they differentiate you when you are competing for that business. And so I think that's kind of like an easy way to do it.
Yeah, those agents that we're talking about that are kind of dabbling, I call those dabblers, right? It's because they don't have a trusted property manager they can refer to. So they kind of feel like, well, I don't want to refer my client who trusts me to a property manager who might just ruin the relationship. So they just do it themselves. But once they establish someone they trust, right? Then they're more likely to give you that business.
Yeah. I think if I could just add a point to that, because one of the things I recalled as you were talking about that is, I think the way you win that trust is once you establish that relationship with a real estate agent, you have to continue to work with them. And what I mean by that is that includes when they do refer business to you and you're managing a property that came from them, that you're still staying in touch with them as if it's still their client. That's how I refer, it's their client, because it is. And if that property owner ever wants to sell that house, I refer them back to them. But in the meantime, you don't want to just go off the grid. If there's something significant going on that I think is worthy of sharing with that agent, I reach out to them and say, hey, just want to let you know, I was talking to the homeowner, they're actually thinking about, they mentioned, the next few months they might want to do something, or just letting you know we are going to renew the lease. Do you want to list the property for rent, or do you want me to do it? Basically just keep them in the know. And then one last point is, the other thing I find too is things will go wrong, right? There will be situations where something could get ugly with either a homeowner and or a tenant. And I think I have found over the years I've been in property management that it's not always the story you hear. So when you talk to a real estate agent and they say, oh, this other property management company, they were awful. And that's, sometimes when you do the homework and dig in, there's some bad property management companies and there's some really good ones, but oftentimes it's understanding what the story is.
Right.
And sometimes once you hear the story, you realize it's just, things happen when you're managing a property, and sometimes it's not that the property manager didn't do his or her job. There are other factors that were involved, and I think again, if you keep a good line of communication with the referring agent, even if there's a bad situation or something that happens, that you want to let them know so that they understand from your point of view kind of why there's.
Better to hear it from you.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, I want to shift gears a little bit. You kind of gave us a really great idea of kind of like your business size, kind of what challenge you're facing soon at your size. But we actually posted this interview, the potential that we're going to interview a property manager on Facebook, and we got a couple questions that they wanted me to ask. So first one, now we're kind of getting into the technical aspects of things. How do you determine normal wear and tear versus actual damage on one of your properties? That's a tricky one sometimes, right? So normal wear and tear versus actual damage. Like if you were to see some pictures.
Yeah. I actually think a lot of that has to do with setting expectations with the owners and the tenants up front when you're taking on a new client, a new owner, as well as when you're moving in a new tenant. That things like touch-up, that to me is normal wear and tear. Unless they're using, 10 penny nails to hang a small picture on the wall. I don't think that that's something that the tenant's responsible for. I think as a homeowner or an investor, you should expect between tenancies, especially if you've had a long-term tenant, that you're going to have to bring somebody in between those tenancies and get the house, I like to call it deep cleaned, right? Get it professionally cleaned, have the walls touched up, if not the place repainted, because at the end of the day, how you present the house to somebody also reflects on what kind of tenants you get, right? Yeah. And so,
that's right.
You can make a decision whether you want to just keep the house in a really bad state, and then you're going to get the kinds of tenants that kind of fit that situation.
In keeping with time, let's see, here's one. What strategies work well for you to encourage a tenant to move out before a lease ends?
So that's what I was going to, so we chatted about this before, and I assume that that's what you were talking about. Yeah. I think the best way to answer that is just to give you some examples, because I've done that on 2 occasions in the last 24 months.
Oh, okay. I thought you were going to say 24 hours.
No, last 24 months. And I think, one, obviously you're always wanting to keep your client's interest top of mind. Like that's who you're representing. So you want the outcome to work to their advantage. And I think what you find is, even though there's always a legal path, right? But a legal path is never the best path. Yeah. Because if you're trying to collect $3 or $4 or even $10,000 left in the lease, what's it going to cost to take that down the legal road?
We're talking strategies that don't involve legal.
Right. Yeah. And so putting that aside and knowing that that's really, that's sort of the outcome and the way that will play out, in both these situations, I recommended to my client that we work out a deal with the tenant that if they cooperate in letting us put the house up for rent again, That means letting people in and keeping the house neat and clean and in showing condition. And we get somebody to rent the house. Let's say they have 4 months left in the lease, but we have someone that can move in next month in 30 days. As long as there's no gap between periods, that we will terminate the lease, which is all done simultaneously, terminate the lease with the existing tenant at the same time we start the new one. And if there's any residual, if there's any difference in or loss to the owner, that comes from the tenant, but the loss to them is a lot less. And in both situations, the tenants were, because of their situations, they were very happy that we worked out a deal like that. And everybody wins. You know, the client's happy, they get somebody new that they feel more confidently that they're going to pay the rent on time. And the tenants are happy because you've allowed them an exit, right, in a reasonable way. And if you do the right thing, generally or typically it's going to work itself out.
Yeah, well, that's good. I like that. Weirdest, scariest, or nastiest thing that's ever happened that you've seen? Any drama so far, or has it been relatively low key?
I'd love to hear like a story you have, but I would tell you I haven't seen anything really, really crazy yet. I mean, I just moved somebody out of a townhouse a couple months ago that had been in there for 5 years, and I had acquired this property a year ago, a little less than a year ago. But during that 5-year period, they had a really large dog, and they did just a lot of damage to the house. There was just chewed up base molding, and the carpet, which looked new from the pictures I saw previously, looked like it was in great shape. It needed to be replaced. I mean, it was just it required a lot. There was a lot of damage done, but I mean I wouldn't call that crazy. To me, and the story there was, and I know this isn't really your question, but this is another sort of great area to talk about, this is where I think oftentimes if you're working with clients who aren't investors, who are cash flowing their property, and they know they know to keep a 20 to 30% maintenance reserve fund because they're going to be, it costs money to maintain a property, whether you're living in it or renting it. And they've gone 5 years without having to, or 4 years or 3 years without putting really any money into it other than a couple small repairs here and there. It always will come back. At some point, there's going to be like the big expenses because, and especially after 5 years. Now that being said, in this particular case, a lot of the money that was spent to bring it back up to par is what you would have done anyway. Again, getting back to like between tenancies, after 5 years with the same occupants, I would expect that you'd be repainting the property. I'm sure you do the same thing.
It's going to catch up with you eventually. If you haven't been spending any money, I haven't spent any money in 5 years. Well, that's why you got to spend money now.
But to me, again, these are conversations. I think this is part of the pre-selling activities that need to take place with your owners about what to expect if they've never owned a rental property before and how that sort of plays out so that they're not surprised when an event occurs that's going to be costly.
Yeah, kind of setting them up. Okay, so I want to go back to kind of these practical questions because you mentioned dog, and the last question that was brought up on the Facebook questions was your pet policy. How's that working for you, and what's your criteria for the pet policies?
Well,
did it work for you on that dog?
Well, when my clients ask me should I allow pets, I always recommend that they don't allow pets. Okay. And I say this as a pet owner. I've got a lab who's home right now. I love dogs. I love pets. But for renting properties, my experience has been there are more people, when people are calling or inquiring about a property that's on the market for rent, there are more people inquiring about a property that hasn't had any pets in it than is pet friendly. So you're right. On the one hand, you might lose, there are folks out there that have pets that are looking for properties to rent. But I think I have found that you actually, the bigger audience are people that don't have pets, who a lot of which ask the question, have there been pets in this property because they have allergies and things like that. So I just think that's one reason why I just think it's better at least start and go, no pets. Or at the very minimum, you start on a case-by-case basis and then,
So if you do accept the pet, what's your policy there? Like if you say, okay, yes to this pet, do you have any financial requirements to kind of help maintain standards and security, that type of thing?
So if we did one, and I've actually acquired properties that already had pets, and so when I had to renew the lease, we renewed the same pet addendum that was already associated with the underlying, with the original lease. So usually a pet addendum, and oftentimes there's, if there's more than one pet, you might have, you would be asking for additional money. I know some, and I haven't done this, some property managers charge like a monthly pet fee that's non-refundable.
Yeah, we do pet rent. Yeah.
I know another technique, and we've talked about this, is not even having a pet addendum, basically just adding whatever you think the pet amount should be. You just build that into your security deposit so that you're not limited to what you can use to take care of pet-related matters. And so we'll probably go down that path going forward.
So in the case of the big dog house.
The big dog.
Were you able to, did you have a pet policy in place to help capture some of that money back from the damages? Or?
Well, that house, like I said, that one, I had acquired it.
Oh,
so
that was
already
inherited.
had it. Yeah, I inherited
so
that. And there was a
one.
pet addendum,
Okay.
but that thing wasn't going to cover even close to what had to be be done to restore that.
It's interesting. I think that's one philosophy where we may differ as far as the pet policy, as far as accepting pets or not. Which could even turn out to be a niche. Like you could actually make that a niche where it's like the properties we manage are, what do you call that? Allergy friendly.
Right.
Most of these don't have a history of pets being in it, because I think the mainstream thought for property managers is yes, accept pets, because you want to be pet friendly and accept tenants who have pets. A lot of people have pets. So I think your take on it's a little different, but you could actually make it work in your favor. You could say we're the niche that our homes don't have pets generally.
Well, again,
Right?
it's just a recommendation.
Yeah.
And if I get an offer to rent the house and they have a pet, I present every offer.
Of course. Yeah.
And so I'll tell, and so I've had several clients who have said, you know what, I mean, we love pets, can we make this work? And we figure out a way to make it work. But I would tell you one other reason why I'm not a big fan of pets is because, and I know we talked about this one time before, and that is when you go to lease the house again, when you're looking for new tenants, I have found that can be really difficult working with the current occupants to schedule showings.
Oh, yeah, that does become
especially if they've got,
Yeah.
I don't even really think it matters whether it's a big dog or a small dog, but a
Yeah.
lot of tenants will say, we don't want anybody showing the property while we're at work and the dogs or the cats are at home. And you want to be reasonable, but reasonable is not, you can't show the property. And so how do you make that work? And I have found that can be really difficult.
That's a good point.
And so in that way, you're not really serving your clients' needs, because you might not rent the property for another month or so because how difficult it is to show it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Sometimes I feel like because they have a pet, you have to spend more time setting their expectation on the front end, saying, let's talk about showings.
Right.
Even though you might forget about this 9 months down the road.
Right.
Okay, so what is your goal for this year? Do you have a goal for this year for your company? Do you have a number goal?
Yeah, I'd like to hit 100 properties by the end of the year.
Nice.
And I think I said early in the conversation, I'd like to either have hired somebody or, and I think I've mentioned to you this in previous conversations, either hire someone to begin or provide operational support, and or start looking at a different way to sort of market and grow the business. So rather than marketing to real estate agents and some of these other traditional channels that we talk about, putting together almost like joint ventures. I don't know if that's so legally speaking, but find ways to sort of grow the business with the help of other businesses, if you will.
Like a strategic
that
partnership.
maybe you strategic partnerships, and then maybe you give them shares of the organization in order to help grow the business. So I'm still kind of sorting through how that could look as a way to really jumpstart, or not jumpstart, but as a way to really grow in a sort of an exponential way, grow in a much bigger way, in a faster way.
Good.
So,
well, here's the 2020 goals.
Here's the 2020 goals.
Thanks, Tom, for being on this interview. And if you're watching this and you have some ideas for more comments or for more interviews like this, if you want to see more property managers or investors being showcased here, talk about how they got started, please be sure to comment below. And again, Tom, thanks for
I appreciate it. Thanks for having
on
me.
the show.
Thanks for having me.
We'll see you next time. This is your favorite homeboy signing out.